Good afternoon, colleagues. So welcome to the Together for Transparency side event, leveraging transparency to drive greater ambition. Colleagues, transparency sits at the heart of the Paris Agreement. Transparency arrangements under the Convention and the Paris Agreement play a crucial role in driving greater ambition by providing a clear understanding of parties' efforts, enhancing mutual trust and confidence amongst parties, ensuring accountability, supporting domestic policymaking, and facilitating learning and knowledge sharing amongst parties. This side event, which is organized under the banner of Transparency, Together for Transparency, will consider issues, challenges, and opportunities in leveraging transparency arrangements under the Convention and the Paris Agreement to drive greater climate ambition from a range of perspectives. So this side event will have three segments. In the opening segment, the Director of Transparency Division, Mr. Donald Cooper, will provide his opening remarks, and this will be followed by a scene-setting presentation by Xuhong Wang on the Enhanced Transparency Framework, Fundamentals, Reviews, and Resource Implications. In the next segment, which is the centerpiece of this side event, it will feature a panel discussion moderated by His Excellency Mr. Carlos Fuller, who's the Ambassador, Permanent Mission of Belize to the United Nations. Mr. Fuller will guide the discussion by requesting the panelists to focus on a set of guiding questions around transparency's role in driving greater climate ambition. And we have a distinguished panel of speakers here today, comprising party representatives, national policymakers, and transparency experts. In the third segment, there'll be an opportunity for further discussion and for raising questions to the panelists and the Secretariat. And this will be followed by a brief wrap of the main takeaways from the discussion. So without further ado, let me invite Mr. Donald Cooper, Director, Transparency Division, to provide his opening remarks. Don, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I really don't know what to say now, because I was looking through my presentation and you mentioned everything that I was supposed to say. What do we do now, Jihong? We really must stop hiring highly competent people, you know. They're making our lives too easy. I have one positive thing to say right from the beginning. We are so bad at describing what we are doing that when you actually see one that looks as though a taxi driver could look at it and go, that's interesting, you have to point it out. The title of our meeting is Leveraging Transparency to Drive Greater Ambition. We must have hired an outside consultant to come up with that, because to be honest with you, nobody in the Secretariat could come up with a title that short. I mean, we would have to add, you know, when it's raining on a Tuesday and your grandmother went to the dentist and he wasn't there, but he came the next day and she was okay, full stop. Now that would be more like the title we would come up with. Right? But it shows we're learning. We're turning over a new leaf. And this is what's so remarkable about the period we live in when it comes to how the world is handling climate. We spent decades preparing ourselves for something, but preparing ourselves. Now, we have stepped over that line and we're supposed to be implementing what we were preparing ourselves for. The unfortunate thing is none of us can remember what it was we were preparing ourselves for, but we know that it was important. Right? What we are doing now is defining what those things are. The objectives of the Convention, Protocol, and Paris Agreement, all of them, saving the planet from climate. Every country agrees to that. Otherwise, why would you have bothered for all those years, right? It's important. It's highly important. So it's never in question. When actions don't match what one country wants to another, it's not because they don't have the same goals, it's that their way of getting there is different. Right? But where we are now is that we have all launched this period of ever-increasing implementation activities to get to the goal. What we are looking at with transparency, and I had a huge day of dialoguing with virtually every country under the sun, alleviating their concerns that their transparency regime will not be there when they need to use it, right? And to show how important it is to all of those parties. So what we are here is to bear in mind that sometime in 2025, the results of your biennial transparency reports are going to appear. And the synthesis report of all activities are going to appear. Right? This biennial transparency report is, in essence, the first report card that every single party is going to make on how well did I do. And I want to check, how well did you do? How well did you do? Did you live up to your commitment? Am I proud or am I embarrassed? It'll be the first report card issued. And what we are doing here is seeking how, when you issue your first report card, and the world pulls them all together, and we have a global report card, how far are we of where we need to be? And if you are able to issue your own report card, how much do you comprehend of what your national economy, your national development looks like, so that you can determine where you can take greater steps, or it's in your benefit to take those greater steps. Those steps are going to be vastly different country by country. The objective, though, is to utilize practices that allow you to look at them all and determine, yes, we are already doing our maximum in this one. We never even thought to look at this one. We can apply actions here. We thought we were doing this for the global good, but in reality, it makes a whole heap of money for our people and we get lots of employment. For example, many, let's put it down to industry level. Many companies would brag that for the good of the planet and all the people who live on it, and to show just how caring we are going to stop producing fossil fuel powered cars by 2030, 2035, and only produce those run by alternatives. In other words, electricity. And we're doing it because we are so good and we like the world so much. The fact that they make more money is completely irrelevant, right? But it's the case. We have states within countries who are switching to using solar-generated power instead of fossil fuels. And it's because they are green. It's because they have a higher conscience. The fact that the electricity is cheaper has nothing to do with it. Right? But it is important for each country to look at how you achieve those things and for what reasons. And those reasons should also include that it is beneficial to your country, because you have to sustain it and your people must want it. I know in my country where they're paying 20% of their salary just to pay for electricity, if you told them you only have to pay 15% of your salary, they would say, I will vote you in again next term. Doesn't that sound good to a policymaker? But here we are going to explore exactly that. What are the different components that make up how we are responding, how we can look and see how others are responding to the same thing, how we can take our knowledge and utilize that to say, oh yeah, we are already doing more than most in this area, but we're not doing hardly anything in that one. Or we were going left here, we should maybe be going right. It will do more for us and more for the planet. So this idea of understanding, putting in perspective, and then maximizing the returns. Every time you maximize the return to your country, you maximize the return to the planet. Every little tiny bit makes a difference. I used to think the world was so big and complicated that it's almost impossible to change the direction it's going in. Then along came COVID. If I was in a food store and sneezed, the entire city of Bonn shuts down for a week. All of a sudden, Germany is banning people from the Bahamas for at least another 10 days. Right? You need 3 years of clearance to get a vaccine. I'm getting my injection in 9 months. It doesn't matter if you don't like the injection, it's there. The world changed. You cannot stop fossil fuels from being utilized. Well, COVID came along and fossil fuels went down to near the ground. Of course, we stopped that problem, but now fossil fuels are going back up again. But the fact that the world changes massively with very little input, it shows the power that your actions have and the influence that you generate not just in your own countries, but globally. So I want to thank our esteemed panel, because that's how they described them to me. So they must be important because they're esteemed. They are going to feel really pressured now in coming up with all sorts of wonderful, innovative things to tell you. And your job is to make sure that they can back it up. Don't just sit there and say, because they are esteemed, what they say is true. If you think, then make them explain it to you. That's what I do all the time. That's why they consider me to be a pest, but a good pest. So make them explain. You should not just hear it, you should understand it. It's not your job to understand it. It's their job to facilitate your understanding it. That's why they're esteemed. And at the end, when Carlos is wrapping up, you can tell them whether or not you think they're really esteemed. I'm going to leave you with one thing that I have been really impressed with, extraordinarily impressed. I went to visit Ambassador Spencer's country about a month ago, Belize, or Belize. I can't get that E on the end, no matter how much I try. It's Belize. And we were discussing implementation of the Enhanced Transparency Framework, and in particular, how do they do their first biotransparency report. And we were discussing with the Latin American and Caribbean countries. And what we were trying to get over to the group was that we wanted you to prepare the best report that you could, but with the capability that you have, not with the consultant that you bought. It's amazing if you got a $600,000 from the Jeff to do your report. Consultants will tell you, wow, that just so happens to be exactly the amount to be able to deliver this for you. Isn't that great? Right? But we asked them to consider how best. If they got funding from the Jeff for the first 2 BTRs, and there's a national communication in there somewhere, it's about $1.3, $1.4 million. They can utilize that to establish their own unit within their country, and that's responsible for providing the support and oversight and guidance, et cetera, on all climate matters, and produce the BTRs with national capability and so on and so on and so on. And lo and behold, when we spoke to Belize, they did exactly that. They've got a 8 or 9 person unit that manages all of these. As a country with an exemption, because they're a SID, they don't have to produce the first BTR when everybody else does. But chances are they'll produce the first 2 before most of the developed countries do, because they put that entire facility in place, and they'll be utilizing those funds to make it consistent. I mean, it'll be there year after year after year after year, and it doesn't impact their national budgets. And when they submit the report, it will be a reflection of their capability and where they are. Right? So I have been duly impressed with the way in which Belize has gone along. I actually asked the minister, the environment minister, well, why haven't you told all your colleagues about this? And his answer to me when we were over dinner was they were too busy doing it. So I told him, yeah, you can't get away with that. So we're going to stick you in the cup and you can tell everybody how you have done it. So it shows that leadership comes from throughout the entire process. And I think Belize has a great message to convey. It's a shame he's not one of the esteemed experts, but I'm sure he'll slip it in there somewhere. So with that, and because Gopal is giving me the side eye, I will stop talking and remind you all to enjoy the experience, the learning, the meeting of new contacts, people you will likely see over and over again all over the place, and who you can learn from, and who you can pass information on to. You are in like a group of friends who are improving. Like my son tells me he's in these homework groups with his friends. I don't believe it, but you all are truly in a group of friends where you are learning together. So with that, I'm going to run to the bureau meeting and pass back to Gopal. Enjoy.
Thank you, Don.
Oh, we don't applaud in the UN.
Thanks for those insightful words, Don. So now, colleagues, let me turn to Ms. Chu-Hong Wong, a manager reporting and review subdivision, to present on the ETF fundamentals, reviews, and resource implications. Chu-Hong, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nadine, and good afternoon, colleagues. Just now, Don gave a very impactful remarks. Actually, he covered all the aspects of transparency, including the benefits of transparency. So for me, then life is much easier. So I can skip quite a bit of what I'm planning to talk about. Over the past week, actually, there were quite a number of events under the banner of Together for Transparency. And there we actually already covered many aspects of the implementation of the new transparency framework under the Paris Agreement, including the development of the reporting software, including the development of the new technical training course for review experts. So today, in my presentation, I will talk a little bit more about one aspect that hasn't been covered during the past few days, which is really one of the key elements of the whole transparency framework, which is technical review conducted by international experts. And actually, this is one of the fundamental elements that really drives ambition, which it comes back to our subject today. And so I will talk a little bit about, what Secretariat has been doing, and then later on we hear from the panelists, our wonderful panel, esteemed members, about their experiences at the national level. How the entire transparency process, in particular technical reviews, really help drive greater ambition. So if we can move to the first slide. The next one. So that's the one. So I'll be very, very brief here because indeed Don has already covered a lot, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with this. So basically, the enhanced transparency framework is one central piece in the Paris Agreement architecture. It actually links the NDC process. It links the GST process. because under the Paris Agreement, parties prepare and communicate their NDCs, which are national climate plans. And then the enhanced transparency framework actually provides the framework for parties to report on their NDC progress, and also, first of all, to measure the progress, and then to report. And then after that, the reports will go through the review, so which is the subject of my presentation today. So they go through a very rigorous technical review process, and this process actually helps validate the data and information reported by parties. And then this will ensure that the inputs to GST is meaningful inputs. It's not, parties report, but whether the reported information can be justified or verified. So that's the key added value of the review process. So this whole review under the enhanced transparency framework ensures that meaningful inputs to GST, which in turn informs the next round of NDC. So if we move to the next, so this slide shows the key milestones. As you can see, transparency mechanism is not new. We have a history of almost 30 years. It started from the very first national reports submitted by developed country parties back in 1994. And then over the years, this transparency mechanism evolved into a very comprehensive MRV system. MRV stands for measurement, reporting, and verification. In Paris at COP22, parties established this enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. And then the parties spent a few years negotiating on the rules, how to implement this enhanced transparency framework. So from Katowice, from Glasgow, now we have a complete, comprehensive set of rules and guidance to help operationalize this enhanced transparency framework. So if we move to the next. So a few key principles here. As I mentioned just now, the enhanced transparency framework actually builds on the current transparency framework and further enhances it. And the enhanced transparency framework aims to promote continuous improvement over time. Also, because enhanced transparency framework actually applies the common set of rules to all parties, it recognizes the different starting point. Parties are all at different stages. So built in the enhanced transparency framework, it has flexibility being applied to developing country parties that need it in the light of their capacities. And of course, one key element is the continuous support, financial technical support being provided to developing countries to help them speed up. So if we move to the next, so the core elements for those who are not that familiar with the transparency framework, three key elements: reporting by parties, review by international experts, and then the third element is multilateral peer review process. So we call it facilitative FMCP, facilitative multilateral consideration of progress. So in this progress, each individual party is being assessed by everyone in the room. Of course, there are questions and answers, clarifications. So that's the process. Very briefly. Let's move on. So now I will talk a little bit about, the added value, just to elaborate a little bit more why and how it helps to enhance ambition by all. So as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, under the Paris Agreement, parties report on their progress in NDC implementation, and then this data will be verified, technically validated, in particular on 2 points, on 2 aspects. One is the progress in NDC implementation and achievement. The other technical validation is on support provided by developed country parties. So this verified data helps provide insights to inform policy and action. So So this verified data really comes out of the review process. So that's one key message I wanted to share with you. Improved tracking of progress. Why improve? What do we mean by improved tracking of progress? If you look at the new set of guidance and rules from the enhanced transparency framework, you'll find a lot more details that guide the reporting in terms of, for instance, NDC description, the indicators for parties to track progress, the assumptions, methodologies that define how parties track progress. It includes effects of policies and measures. To the extent possible, you quantify the effects in terms of GHG emission reductions and removals. So all these really ensured under the enhanced transparency framework there's more rigorous track of progress. And then again, after reporting and then review, will assess based on these very rigorous provisions to assess parties' progress in NDC implementation. Also, the other aspects I wanted to share with you is in the new framework, transparency framework, developing countries, they provide more granularity in terms of their support received and needed. And this will really help the support for climate actions to be provided in a more targeted manner. So, and then finally, on the mutual learning and collaboration, I think it's pretty straightforward. You know, review process helps experts to engage, interact with countries, with national governments, and with their national experts. And really, it's a mutual learning. It's a sharing of best practices and knowledges. And all in all, this process helps build trust and accountability to ensure the effectiveness of the implementation of the Paris Agreement and helps drive greater ambition. Resource implications now. Comparing to where we are now with the future under the enhanced transparency framework, you see the numbers here. There is, in terms of the numbers of reports going through review, there is much more. In terms of the scope of reports, the new transparency framework has an expanded scope of reporting. So there are more elements to be reviewed. In terms of frequency of review, also it implies much more than what we are doing now. So the whole process right now is a resource-intensive process. So as you can see here on the left hand, this column shows where we are now. So basically we have 44 biannual reports every 2 years being reviewed, 44 national communications by developed countries being reviewed every 4 years, 44 GHG inventories being reviewed. These are from developed countries, 44. That will be reviewed every year. For the BURs, which are for developing country parties, from 2014, we have altogether technically analyzed 155. That's equals to an average of 20 per year. In terms of forest reference level and REDD+ reports, from 2014, we have altogether 114 reports. That's an average of 13 per year. So that's where we are now, the number of reports going through review. Now, starting from early 2025, we're facing with a situation, then 195 Paris Agreement parties will submit a biannual transparency reports every 2 years. So the review will be done, on that basis. Every 2 years, you review 195. On top of that, developed countries will continue to submit annual GHG inventories, 44 every year. So that's going through the simplified review process. So that's review. So if you compare now and the future, we say that the work will double. So there is a significant resource implication there. So next. Now, given that, so what we're going to do, there is a need, because of the limited financial and human resources we already encounter right now in terms of the review process, there's a need for a sufficient funding to cover 194 biannual transparency reports reviews every 2 years and simplified reviews of national GHG inventories every year. And there's a need for an increase in review expert resources, because right now in the new system, the review expert resources need doubles. So we need more experts. So that means that, when we are now designing the new review procedures, we try to design it in a cost-efficient manner. Cost-efficient, however, still should be effective in order to ensure that, the process helps parties improve their reporting over time. And also, one other challenge is because the review is done for all parties, there has to be a tailored approach. Even though we follow the mandate of the reviews, there needs to be some kind of, we need to factor in this, targeted review so that we help parties at different stages. Next. I think that's one of the last. So in designing the new review procedures and tools, first of all, we need to be consistent. We need to follow the mandate. The review experts need to check for consistency with the MPGs, with the modalities and guidelines. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the review process needs to be designed in a way to pay special attention to national capacities and circumstances of developing countries. There we have been thinking about, how best we can help parties to prioritize, to really, to distill an essential list of issues that are really helpful to countries. And then, needless to say, the review tools, procedures needs to be user-friendly and based on existing good practices, and also recognizing the evolving nature. We're learning by doing. We will do better each round. So last slide, what we're doing now. We are continuing to develop the new review tools, procedures, and bearing in mind the guiding principles I mentioned just now to be efficient and serve for purpose. We start to develop the IT review tools to help facilitate the new review process. Then we are now also start to test our new procedures with early submissions. At the Secretariat, we are supporting the new reviewers training as well as testing of the reporting software, which are all fundamentals for the well-functioning of the new system. And lastly, expand review expert resources. I'll skip the last slide. So, I think now it's time for us to hear from the panel, and then maybe we can take the questions all together at the very end.
Thank you, Shuhong. I think that was very, very helpful. So, colleagues, now let me invite Mr. Carlos Fuller, Ambassador Permanent Mission of Belize, to the United Nations to chair the next two segments, in fact, the panel discussion and the QA session. And let me also invite the distinguished or esteemed panelists to take their places on the podium. Carlos, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And I trust this will be your last session for the weekend, and you can enjoy the rest of the weekend. Oh, I see some people saying, no, we have more work to do. My goodness. Well, thank you. First of all, let me say thank you very much to the Secretariat for giving me the honor to participate in this side event. It has been my pleasure over the years to serve on the CGE many, many years ago, and then since that time actually serve as a review expert on the biannual update reports. So indeed, I have some knowledge of this process. However, today it is now my honor to moderate a panel discussion by 4 distinguished panelists. Indeed, they will present a range of perspectives dealing with the issues, the challenges, and the opportunities in leveraging transparency arrangements under the Convention and under the Paris Agreement to drive greater climate ambition. And one thing that Zuhang did not mention is the need for us to get more review experts. You see how many reviews we'll be having to do starting in 2025. And so we need many, many more experts. So please, when you go home, get your experts to register and undertake the training. It's very easy. I passed it myself. And so we need experts indeed to review this, these BTRs that parties will start to prepare next year. To begin with our first discussant, it's my pleasure to introduce Victoria Novikova, who is the lead negotiator on the delegation of Belarus to the UNFCCC. She is a UNFCCC accredited transparency expert and a reviewer of greenhouse gas inventory, member of the UNFCCC CGE, UNFCCC Article 6.4 mechanism roster of experts on methodologies and climate policy. She holds a PhD in environmental sciences and policy and has extensive experience in transparency issues gained at the international level at the UNFCCC Secretariat, at the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency of UNOPS and UNDP, as well as in national transparency reporting and climate policy making. So, Victoria, based on your experience as a transparency expert, CGE member, and a national policymaker, how has the transparency process benefited countries and thus contributed to driving greater ambition?
Thank you, Carlos, for this question. Transparency process has significantly benefited countries and contributed significantly to driving the ambition of climate actions, but by building national institutional capacities, national technical capacities for data collection and analysis and reporting, helped countries formulate and develop national climate policies that are appropriate to national circumstances based on robust information provided by transparency systems, enable developing countries access financial, technology, and capacity building support. As you know, reporting to the UNFCCC requires the establishment of institutional arrangements underpinned by the legal and regulatory framework. And these enable all actors within the country, both governmental and non-governmental organizations, public and private actors, to collaborate together in order to compile, analyze, and interpret data needed for transparency and reporting on progress for climate action and support. And institutional arrangements enabled statistical offices to improve the quality and coherence of data used for reporting, and this is a good element of good governance because we need to understand what we manage. It also helped inform the development of climate policy making in all economic sectors. The robustness and consistency of data enhanced the robustness and consistency of projections and business as usual scenarios that in turn provided the evidence-based information for the update of NDC. It also enhanced the development of climate policies and actions which are based on the robust information and appropriate to national circumstances. The more granular the projections are, the better of the understanding of countries is on how the economy is likely to develop. What climate finance technology, what are the technology needs to underpin this development? What are the climate finance needs of these technologies to deploy them on the ground? And what are the capacity needs that are needed in order to deploy these technologies on the ground in the country? And all this helped access finance for technology and capacity building support for implementation. Collected transparency information also enabled countries to analyze the efficiency and effectiveness of policy implementation in order to better understand the linkages between policies and emission trends, identify the cost-effectiveness of cost-effective improvements of climate policies and measures, and this way drive the ambition of climate action.
Thank you very much, Victoria. I believe everyone knows our next panelist. However, you may not know that Marcelo Rocha is a multilingual agronomist and an Atherloo expert. As one of the lead negotiators for Brazil since 2003, Marcelo has a deep understanding of current international climate change rules relating to accounting and transparency, including the requirements, processes, and guidelines established by the UNFCCC and the IPCC. He is a UNFCCC accredited greenhouse gas inventory lead reviewer, acting as generalist and agriculture sector expert, national communication, biannual report reviewer, and BUR technical expert. He has been participating in the UNFCCC review and technical analyses since 2005. He holds a master's degree and a PhD in environmental economics, and he and I worked together on a review only last month. Marcelo, over to you.
Thank you, Carlos. And first, let me thank you, the Secretariat, to give me the opportunity to be here with you today. I want to focus a little bit on the review and how this can be used to increase the ambition of the NDCs. But to do that, I want also to invite you to take a different look in the review. A lot has been said about why the review is necessary and important to build trust, to make sure that the numbers that we see, for example, in the GHG inventory are robust numbers, and the actions that are taken by parties will lead them to achieve the NDC. Yes, all of this is true and is part of the review process. But I also want you to see the review as a great opportunity. We see sometimes, particularly developing country parties that have not engaged in so much in reviews. We saw the numbers, we had a lot of technical analysis of BURs, but the expert review that we are talking about, the technical expert review that will dig in the details of the GHG inventories and the actions that will be reported to the NDC. This will be the first time for all of us, but in particular for the developing countries. And sometimes some people in the developing countries say to me, Marcelo, I'm a little bit concerned because we're going to see all of these technical experts, all of these people making questions to us, and we don't know if we're going to be able to respond properly. We don't know if we have the information to respond to them. And then at the end, we're going to have a lot of recommendations that we don't know if we're going to follow or be able to implement. Okay, that's not a problem. In fact, that's a great opportunity. We will engage in debate. We will learn from each other. So I look forward to have this opportunity to make questions to countries. And of course, if they say, well, we don't have the answer, that's great. We don't all have all the answers. So I think it's a great opportunity to engage, to have this dialogue. Think about consultancy for free. Donna was saying that there is a lot of consultancy going on. I am a consultant as well. So people will always say, okay, we're going to have to hire these people and they cost money. Well, these review teams will cost you nothing. I mean, the UNFCCC will invite people to be part of the review team, and they were going to work for free. They were going to be there to assist you and respond also to your questions for free. So I think this is a great opportunity to that developing country parties in particular will have to have this expertise, this knowledge, and share together the experience that we have. And by the end of the day, there's going to be a review report and there's going to be recommendations. But again, it's not that you have to be the best in class, you have to respond to everything. That was not the case in the beginning from developed country parties. They have learned a lot, of course, and now they are better in responding questions. But in the beginning, they also had the same difficulties that we as developing country parties will face. So see this as an opportunity. Engage with us, engage with the technical expert reviews, bring your questions to us. It's not only respond to the questions that we're going to put to you, but also bring your questions to us. And we're going to do, of course, our best to respond to this. And at the end, we hope with this exchange, parties will have better information, a better understand, not all of what they have reported and how good or distant are from the reporting requirement. That's not the point here. I think what is important is that with this, you will have another layer of information, another set of ideas that you can take on board when you plan the next report and you plan your next NDC. If you take this as an exercise that will give you these inputs, I am 100% sure these inputs will be good, and we're going to use this to make it better. If it's in the next report on the other one, doesn't matter. And when it comes to a new NDC, also all of this information, all of this exchange will most likely facilitate you to do much more. Of course, you need money, you need technology, you need capacity building. But this also will be in the report as well. So we see this as a great opportunity so we can think together and find solutions together. So don't worry if you're not in the top of the class, if you have hundreds of recommendations, that doesn't matter. I think the interaction, the dialogue that we're going to have through the expert review process is what is most important to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. And indeed, it is that exchange that gets us to produce better reports, means that we're getting closer to achieving the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Our next panelist is Sandra Mosawendi, the Deputy Director responsible for international reporting on climate change at the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment in South Africa. Sandra is also a member of the CGE under the UNFCCC. Sandra oversees development and publication of South Africa's BURs, including participation in the ICA process, as well as overseeing national communications and upcoming BTRs, including the CBIT project of South Africa. She's a member of South African Delegation on Climate Change Negotiations, focusing on transparency and MRV issues. In addition, she is an accredited reviewer of greenhouse gas inventories, biennial reports, as well as national communications from Annex 1 parties. She is also accredited for and conducts technical analyses of the BURs from non-Annex 1 parties. Sandra, my question to you. Could you provide some insights into how your country, South Africa, as a large developing country, has effectively used information and data from the transparency processes to inform its domestic policy making for undertaking ambitious climate actions? Are there any lessons you can share from your country's experience in transitioning to the ETF? Sandra.
Thank you so much. South Africa has had quite good experience with reporting under the current MRV framework. South Africa has to date submitted 3 national communications for biennial update reports, as well as 7 national inventory reports. The inventory report that we compiled with our third BUR, with the 2000 to 2015 time series, actually contributed to assisting South Africa to develop the Carbon Tax Act. And the Carbon Tax Act is one of the policies in South Africa that promotes the polluter pays principle. And that is also aligned to our national climate change response policy, which really sets out the framework of how we do our fair share to reducing greenhouse gas inventories, as well as transit to a climate resilient economy and build adaptive capacity in South Africa. So that has been one of the key benefits for South Africa in terms of reporting. Also, as we have been reporting in the different biennial update reports and participating in the different ICA circles, we have been able to improve as South Africa. And one of the things that we have done is to develop the key indicators for our key mitigation policies and actions. And doing that has really also helped us to fully analyze the impact of these key mitigation policies and actions. And in doing that, we have also done studies through the mitigation potential analysis, and that studies have helped us also to produce the key projections. The projections that we have also reported in our BUR have also been helpful in the South African case, because that has also assisted us as we prepared the first NDC and also updated our first NDC. So based on our projection, we could see which could be some of the key mitigation policies and actions that we can focus mostly on. As you know, in South Africa, we have a very emission-intensive energy sector because we are heavily reliant on coal for our energy production. So we have been able to really look at those mitigation policies that are really actually working in the energy sector and see how we can also further enhance the implementation of those policies. Also, this reporting has also contributed to helping us develop our national development plan, which also sets out a plan for South Africa. What do we want to take? Where do we actually want to take South Africa in the next coming years? And within the context of our national development plan, we also have transitioning into the lower carbon economy as well as climate resilient economy. And that developing that plan has also been informed by reporting through the different reports. Also, we have developed the low emissions development strategy that has also been informed by our different reporting cycles, because there we could see that based on what we have reported, these are the different pathways that we can take as South Africa. So those have been the different advantages of reporting in the South African context and how that has contributed to developing policy and updating policy at national level. Also, just not about developing policy, also reporting can also help you as a country to look at some of the core benefits, because we normally look at the GHG reduction impact of our actions, but implementing some of those actions actually bring some of the core benefits at national level. And we have seen in the context of South Africa that as we implement like the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Program, as well as the National Energy Efficiency Strategy, implementation of those programs has actually contributed greatly to job creation in South Africa. And job creation in the South African context is very, very important, because in South Africa we have high levels of unemployment and we also have poverty. And addressing poverty and the high levels of unemployment is actually key for South Africa, because those are our overarching priority areas, even as stated in our National Development Plan. So in terms of what we are doing to transition to the enhanced transparency framework, okay, it's a long name. We're doing a lot. We have systems for reporting in South Africa, and we are looking into updating those systems so that they are aligned to the new tools under the enhanced transparency framework. Obviously, we also do not have enough personnel within the reporting unit, and we are looking into securing more funding to get more personnel, and also allow those personnel to attend the different kind of trainings so that they could also become experts in terms of reporting and help South Africa to be able to develop the first BTR and hopefully submit it by the 31st of December. Also, on the actual work, we have also started with the data collection for our first BTR. We will be reporting on the first 2 years of our NDC, the implementation of our NDC. We've also started with the National Inventory Report that we're going to submit with our first BTR, the one for 2000 to 2022. And also, as we prepare our last BUR, because we are also in the process of preparing our last BUR, which is BUR 5, we have decided to use some of the common tabular formats on support, the ones directly from decision 5 CMA3. So we are doing a lot in terms of preparing for the enhanced transparency framework, because as we said, we don't just see it as contributing to the international process and the GST, but we also see a lot of benefits at national level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. I'm sure you have all seen our next panelists in the corridors and in these halls. Bastiaan Hassing is the head of delegation to the UNFCCC for the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. He has held this position since the 1st of September 2019. Before that, he worked in Brussels for 4.5 years as the Climate and Environment Attaché at the Permanent Representation of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to the EU. During this period, he has been involved in the negotiations on the revision of the EU emissions trading system, the effort sharing regulation, and the CO2 standards for light and heavy-duty vehicles. Prior to this, he held several positions in the field of climate and environmental policy at the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and the Environment. Excuse me, as advisor to the minister. Bastiaan, please go ahead. I can't read the question.
Thank you very much, Carlos, and also from my side, many thanks to the Secretariat for inviting me to this event. I think the questions were on the screen before, but I was asked to say something about our own experiences in the MRV and the ETF process throughout the years, and the resulting institutional arrangement that we've come to in the Netherlands. So we have had climate and environmental policies since the early 90s, mostly stimulated by international processes like the UNFCCC, but also within the European Union. The first communication, as Suhong said in her introduction, was published in 1994. And at the time, thank you, at the time it was about 80 pages, 80. Our most recent one has grown to 360 pages, and that's not necessarily an indication of quality, but it does say something about the amount of data that we have collected over the years and that we can use to inform our own national policies. And I just want to emphasize that we are still learning as well, and I think I fully echo Marcelo's point about the usefulness of the peer review process. We finished our latest BTR 2 months ago, more or less, and I was there for the presentation of the peer review team. They do have a lot of questions. Can I say this, Mark? My expert is in the audience. My team was very well prepared, and they were still a little bit nervous about it, because you don't know the questions that are going to be asked ahead of time. But in the end, it's all about improving. So Donald, in his introduction, spoke about trying to get the best report card that you can, and we're still trying to get a better report card for the next time. And so one of the questions was about why we had left a field open, and we had an answer to that, and I think it was due to the fact that we had resolved it in another way, but we didn't explain that. So the question was, but well, why don't you just explain it then? So the next time we'll have an answer for that, and that's, I think, one of the big perks about this peer review process. On the institutional arrangement, as I said, we have collected a lot of data over the years. We have, I think, one of the nicest things to have for me as a policymaker is that we now have a climate law since 2018, I think, with legally binding 2030 and 2050 targets. And part of that climate law is the National Climate and Energy Assessment. It's a yearly publication from an independent environmental assessment agency, and that basically assesses to what extent we are on track to meet our policy goals. And much of that data is, of course, built on the collection of data from the MRV and ETF process. It was a long question. Let me let me just check what the other questions are. It was part to do with challenges we face and how we overcame them. And I think initially, as I said, from the early 1990s, we had a lot of different ministries collecting a lot of different data sets, sometimes from different sources. So it was quite difficult to combine all of that and get a coherent overview. And having an internationally agreed MRV and ETF system helped us in national policymaking to use the same metrics and the same data sets. So that was both challenging and helpful as well. So other questions, how does it help to increase ambition and reinforce policies? I think I basically covered that, having our own independent assessment agency to publish a yearly report, which is over recent years only gaining in attention. It's discussed in our national parliament. Our Minister for Climate and Energy Policy is reporting on that. He'll have to explain, if we're not on track, why that is, what he's going to do to remedy that. Yeah, in that respect, I think Sandra mentioned as well that this is for the national policy process a very helpful tool. Did I miss anything, Carlos? I think I've skipped over some of the questions, maybe, but all in all, most of the issues I think I've covered.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, yes, you have, Bastian. Thank you very much for that. And I just want to emphasize two things that you touched on, and the other panelists. Indeed, as you know, all of us probably face the same thing. We have these institutions and ministries that operate independently, and it's difficult to get them to talk together. However, through this process, they have to talk together when we bring them together. And so, indeed, that certainly helps. And there's, at this stage, almost no difference between a developing and a developed country as we report. As I found out on Tuesday when we did our FSVR, Belize went through it along with, I think, Chile and Brazil. Two much bigger countries than Belize, but each of us got like 10 questions. So we're all treated the same. So we all have to be prepared. So first of all, let me thank the panelists for this introduction. And I'd now like to open the floor for questions. We have about 10 minutes. So please, if you have any questions or comments on this transition or how this transparency framework can actually assist us in achieving the objectives of the Paris Agreement and enhancing our capacities, please. We're open to your questions. Yes, sir. You have the floor.
How long does it take to complete the BTR process? I think all in all, it's almost a year, I think. If you take into account the fact that you compile, report, and then have the peer review process where questions are being asked. First, I think, written questions. You have. How long does it take us to prepare for the BTR process? I'm looking at my expert.
Yeah.
Sure.
Hello? Yes. Maybe just to briefly jump in, we recently submitted our BR and NC, and I believe we started over the summer working towards delivering it in the December, and then we had the review in March. But of course, we were already in the months before summer, we started getting ready. So I think all in all, a full year or 9 months to a year is a fair assessment of that. Yeah. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And indeed, a lot of it has to do with how you've had your data already. The thing is, once you have your data and you have to produce this every 2 years, that takes up a lot of time instead of having to, at the beginning to have to go around and looking for the data. That's what takes a lot of time indeed. Next question.
Thanks. Hi there. Thank you so much to all the speakers. I'm a PhD student, so I wanted to ask a question about data. I'm wondering if there are any existing efforts to kind of aggregate and analyze all of this incoming data kind of at the Secretariat level as opposed to country by country.
Secretariat.
Thank you for the question. Actually, under our process, we have Secretariat has a mandate to do a compilation and synthesis for the data from developed country parties, and that includes, GHG data, mitigation and policies and measures, and also support provided. But then going into the future, we also have a mandate, that's for the compilation and synthesis of the annual transparency report, which will be submitted under the Paris Agreement. We talk about, parties will submit their very first report by the end of next year, and then we will compile and analyze. And then, again, that will be an input to the GST, Global Stocktake process. Thank you.
Thank you, Han. Another question?
Did you want to ask something? No. Okay. Excuse me.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the inputs and the insight views into the countries. My question is to all of you regarding, also in the last days, the Climate Secretariat shared that there's a bottleneck of experts, so there are not enough people to moderate this process, to do the technical review. What would be your wish regarding what governments or ministries in the countries can do to get these people into the roster? So because we heard that the CGE has already the training materials, it's out there. You have to pass the test, where some of the people say it's easily, others say it's difficult. But still, there seems to be like not enough people on the waiting list or approaching the focal points to become an expert. So what would be your strategy or your wish? What on the national level needs to be done to have this, to have a solution for this? Thank you.
Thank you. Very important questions indeed. Who wants to take a shot first? Marcel? Oh. Yeah.
Yes, I would recommend the experts to approach their governments and ask them to be nominated to the UNFCCC roster of experts. And after the nomination, the experts will be invited by the UNFCCC Secretariat to take a training and pass the exam administered by the UNFCCC Secretariat. And after that, they will have an opportunity to participate in the review and right now technical analysis process of biennial update reports. And this would be beneficial not only for those experts who involve in the process by building their own capacity, but it will also be beneficial for the country nominating the experts. They will have enhanced capacity of national experts, very well understanding the reporting and the review requirements of the UNFCCC process. Experts will have an opportunity and exposure to new, more advanced methods for data collection, for analysis, for much better way of reporting some information. And they will have an opportunity of peer-to-peer learning. And with this information, they will come back to their country and they will spread the knowledge in the country. So it will be mutually beneficial process, but the first step is to be nominated to the UNFCCC roster of experts. And I would like to encourage governments to nominate their experts and to encourage experts to approach their governments and to be nominated to the UNFCCC roster of experts. Thank you.
No, just to stress what Victoria was saying, that this is a great opportunity also for the experts. Every time I have the opportunity to review a country, I learn a lot. And then, of course, this learning I can share it with my Brazilian colleagues. And with that, we also can improve our own reporting. So I think this peer review, I think the word peer is very important. And I will encourage, if some of you are thinking to become a review, please do so, because it's, again, a great opportunity also to learn. You're not only going to make questions and receive the answers. So you also have the opportunity to interact with other experts also in the team and the Secretariat that has also a great experience to share with us. So I think this is one of incentives that I will highlight to people to get engaged and also use the information that they will collect in this exercise to also help their own countries in future reportings. Thank you.
Martha, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. I think also in the South African context, we are doing a lot to encourage our experts to be on the roster. As part of implementing our CBIT project, we have like the long-term capacity building strategy, where we will also have training courses for key government employees as well as students on GHG inventory compilation and also tracking progress of NDCs. Noting that if our officials and some of the students understand these processes, then they could also be encouraged to understand how the international reporting cycles work, and also the importance of also participating in the reviews. Because it's also important to not just always be requesting data from institutions, but also showing them actually what that data is being used for and how it is being used. And then also what happens after the reporting is done. Then participating in the reviews also brings about that advantage of reviewing other parties' BRs or BTRs in the context of the enhanced transparency framework, and in the process also building your own capacities. So as we will be implementing that long-term capacity building strategy under our CBIT project in South Africa, we will also be encouraging more and more experts from our different government departments and some of the students who will participate in that training to also become part of our roster of experts and encourage them to write the actual exams, because it's one thing to be on the roster, but it's another thing to register and write exams and try again if you don't succeed the first and the second. I think there are like 3 attempts now. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Bastian, anything to add?
Well, just to say that you asked about my wishes, and I think my fellow panelists have already pointed to the co-benefits of participating in the peer review process. I mentioned that before as well. I think it's an incredibly valuable learning experience also for the experts in my ministry who are working on national policy to see how people do it in other countries. The one wish I would add to that is that my more political bosses would allow them sufficient time to participate in this peer review process, because most of them are so busy with their national policy making that it does weigh a bit on them. But this is incredibly important, and again has huge co-benefits.
Thank you, Bastian. Colleagues, we have rapidly run out of time. However, I think there are 3 key messages that have come out of the panel discussion, the presentation by the Secretariat, and by your questions. Number 1, transparency is crucial for driving greater ambition in climate action. The panel emphasized that transparency plays a pivotal role in enhancing ambition in climate action. By providing accurate, comprehensive and comparable information on emissions, mitigation efforts, and progress toward targets, the transparency mechanism can create a strong foundation for increased ambition. Transparent reporting allows countries to learn from each other's experiences, identify gaps, and identify areas where increased efforts are needed to achieve climate goals. It was emphasized that robust, consistent transparency systems can build trust among nations and stakeholders, facilitate accountability, and enable informed decision-making, thereby driving greater ambition in climate action. Secondly, the implementation of the Enhanced Transparency Framework is resource-intensive and hence needs dedicated efforts and resources both at the national and international levels. At the national level, the panel highlighted the efforts to enhance the capacity of countries to collect, report, and verify climate-related data and ensuring the availability of reliable and up-to-date information. At the international level, it was highlighted that a full and effective implementation of the ETF will entail a considerable expansion and strengthening of the Secretariat's support to the process and thus require a significant increase in both expert and financial resources. And finally, third, enhanced financial and technical support are urgently needed to leverage transparency effectively. The panel underscored the importance of enhanced support and collaboration among countries, international organizations, and other stakeholders to leverage transparency effectively. This includes providing financial and technical assistance to developing countries to enhance their transparency capacities, promoting knowledge sharing and capacity building initiatives, and fostering partnerships to improve data collection and reporting processes. The panel emphasized that collective efforts and cooperation are vital to ensure a transparent and inclusive process that can drive greater ambition in climate action worldwide. With that, let me thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and please join me in giving the panel a big warm welcome. Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon and weekend.
Thank you, Carlos, and the panel for the wonderful discussion, which generated so many good ideas. Before we close, let me take this opportunity to highlight some useful resources that the Secretariat has been developing over the years to facilitate countries transitioning to the ETF. So they're all there in front of you. I think it might be useful if you could use your cameras to scan the QR codes and bookmark them for your future use. These include the ETF reference manual, the ETF FAQs, frequently asked questions, a handbook on MRV ETF institutional arrangements, especially useful to developing countries, ETF technical handbook for developing country parties. It's a sort of like primer for developing country parties to get started, and then ETF review training courses, which are of course the sort of the foundational element for the ETF reviews. So these are very useful resources. Please go check them out, and then I'm sure you're going to be pleasantly surprised. And before we close, these are the QR codes for our Transparency for Together for Transparency main webpage and our LinkedIn group for transparency, where we keep posting updates on review activities and new developments in the ETF and so on. So please do check them out. So with that, I would like to thank you all, the panelists and the audience, for the wonderful participation, and it's been such a wonderful experience being with you all here today. So have a nice afternoon, everyone, and have a nice weekend.